Okay, draft recap, Minnesota Vikings edition. This should be a relatively quick one as there's only five players to talk about, although I have a tendency to ramble, so we will see. But yeah, let's get into the list. The chart you see next to me, just so you know what you're looking at, first number is where that player was taken, then you have the player name, the position, and finally where they were projected to go via the consensus big board. Donovan Jackson, the guard that they draft early on, played tackle in college. They're going to try to transition him into guard. And it's an interesting selection. So for the Vikings, a team that, so they needed a guard. They needed a guard to come in and play. They should have a really good offensive line right now. That's kind of like the last piece they needed. And you're in a situation where usually I would sit here and say, okay, listen, this guy was projected to go 40th, essentially. You take him 15 spots before he was supposed to go. That is usually not what you want to do, because typically just if you look at the history of the NFL, guys who were supposed to go 40th that get selected 25th play like guys who are supposed to go 40th, right? That's just usually how it works. That being said, they were in a really weird spot because they needed a guard, and while usually I don't love drafting for need, when you have a good young quarterback and you want to develop the young quarterback, that's kind of an exception I'll make. If you want to develop the young quarterback, you can make sure that you pump resources into the offense, and to be honest, they've certainly done that. This should be a loaded offense around J.J. McCarthy at this point. So I'm going to be more forgiving of it, especially when they didn't have another pick until 102, right? And so usually you can sit here and say, don't reach on need in round one. Another guard will fall to you at some point that you can reach a little bit better. That's not really the case here. So they kind of felt like they needed to make a move like this. Again, is it what I would have done? I don't know. I think ideally you could have maybe signed someone in free agency to not have to have this issue. But again, there has to be the right guy there as well, right? Ultimately, he should be a pretty good player. I think people will like him. And again, I think he'll be someone who no one's going to buy the jersey of, but is ultimately someone who should help out the offensive line. So you got to like that. So then they didn't pick again until 102, where they selected Ty Felton, a wide receiver who was the main piece of Maryland's offense. He had 2.32 yards per route ran, which is very good. That's something that you like. He was not a superstar necessarily, but a very good player. It is someone who I do wonder if there's any more logic to this other than he's someone who we hope can be a depth piece right here. 6'2", only 180 pounds, so I'm not sure if he has the full strength that you're looking for to play on the outside, but is someone who, again, could come in and at least he's a good player. And ultimately, a lot of what analytics people like to talk about is that sometimes you're better off simply just drafting a good player as opposed to drafting someone with these elite physical traits, because that actually translates better to the next level. A lot of times coaches fall in love with the elite physical traits thinking they can coach the guy up. Doesn't always work out that way. So I'm usually in favor of these types of moves. Again, you have Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. Doesn't get a lot better than that for a 1-2 punch, but they could use some depth. Jalen Naylor, I think, definitely showed some flashes last year, but they could use some depth. So I do think he is someone who they're hoping could be a depth player here for them. They then kind of went the opposite with Tyrone Ingram Dawkins, the edge rusher who they was projected to go a little bit later. They quote unquote reach here, but this late in the draft, you can that's not that big of a deal. It's a little bit more of a reach than you would love to see just on paper, but again, situations are different. Great physical tools, 6'5", 280, so he's listed at edge, but probably you would assume will become a 3-4 defensive end. That's usually how these guys work. The production wasn't there. It just wasn't. Not good production, but hey, Georgia guys, sometimes they look, sometimes it's just tougher for them to get production given how that system works. But ultimately, you're hoping you can develop him. He's a great athlete. Pick 139. You're probably not getting a completely polished player, so usually you get either the good player who doesn't have the athleticism or the good athlete who doesn't have the production, so they kind of get one of each with Felton and with Ingram Dawkins. They then kind of went back to the production well with Kobe King, a off-ball linebacker who had good production at Penn State, using PFF grades, which is obviously not the end-all be-all, but he was a top 40 linebacker in college football according to PFF each of the past 2 seasons. Only about 400 snaps in 2023, but over 700 last year. So that's good. He's just not an athlete, right? So will he have the athleticism to still work at the next level? Sometimes it does work because, hey, they're a good player, but sometimes you can't quite get there, and athleticism does still matter at the end of the day. So getting someone who has potential that way, and hey, at pick 201 for a linebacker, if it doesn't fully work out, you should at least have some special teams prospects. Finally, at pick 202, they selected a guy who is projected to go 303, which is past when the draft ends. So, okay, I'm not really sure what the exact logic is here, but my guess is with something like this, well, his pass blocking metrics weren't actually fantastic. I do wonder if they view him as someone who can come in and be an extra blocker and could be a special teams guy. A lot of times teams like to, in the 200s, draft tight ends because they can sometimes be, extra blocker if you need it, just an extra body there, but also can play special teams. So you're checking two boxes, even if neither of those boxes are super valuable. At the end of the day, if you can essentially fill two roster spots, that still does add value. So there is still some value there. So as a whole for Minnesota, yeah, not the flashiest draft. It wasn't going to be after how flashy last year's draft was. They had to do those trade ups. So because of that, they were kind of going to just, have to have maybe a down draft this year, but still found a way to help out the situation a little more. So yeah, ultimately, those are my thoughts on the Vikings draft. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.